Black ladies, we are in the house tonight. It's so beautiful just to scroll across and see all these beautiful brown skinned faces. As the song said, welcome tonight to our Black Lady Prop Party. What you say now? And you all have turned out tonight. We're so delighted to see each and every one of you. Thank you for taking time out of your Wednesday night to be with us. So look, we're going to try to make this as much of a party as we can. You hear the music going. Thank you so much, DJ, for setting it off for us. If you need a drink, because there's so much going on in November, please go and grab your drink and come back, have a seat, and let's enjoy what's going to happen tonight. So thank you again to all of you and to the Liberty Hill Foundation for all of your support and really helping to make this possible. And we are delighted to be partnering with the Angelinos as well for this for this event tonight. So delighted to see everyone. I think I have. All right, there we go. All right, I lost my slide for a second. So I am Felicia Jones. I am one of the co-founders of B.L.A.C.C. We are building leaders and cultivating change. I'm joined here actually by our co-founder, Casey Patterson, who's sitting in, and you can wave Casey on the screen. We were founded in 2014, really with the intent to harness the collective giving power of professionals to support really Black organizations working on the front lines of social justice in Los Angeles. And we are so pleased to be able to have made gifts to so many organizations in Los Angeles working on the areas of education, jobs, leadership development. And certainly we care about civic engagement, and opportunities like this, events like this, make it possible for us to continue to expand our collective learning and our collective work for social change. So just for those who may not know what a giving circle is, it is really a self-directed group of folks who have decided to pool their resources and make a bigger and larger impact. Basically, we all pulled our coins together and some of our paper dollars together to make sure that we're able to give and use our collective giving power to support organizations. And so tonight, B.L.A.C.C, Building Leaders and Cultivating Change, as well as our partners, Angelinos for Los Angeles Giving Circle, have really collaborated to pull this event together. And I think we have, do we have Anne-Marie, I think, in the room? If you're in the room, you can wave as well. The Angelinos is also a member-driven group of friends who've come together to support racial justice, similarly to B.L.A.C.C. But they're also focusing on different facets of the Black community: women, LGBTQ, immigrants, kids, formerly incarcerated. They are doing amazing work through their giving circle, and we are pleased to be able to partner with them. And of course, we have to thank our partners, the Liberty Hill Foundation, for really supporting our ability to host and have these giving circles. They actually help to manage the fund and provide a whole lot of other capacity and resources to us. And so there will be an opportunity for you to learn more about our giving circles, and hopefully you'll actually want to put your coins in with us and actually support some of the great things that we're able to do as Black professionals. So we're here again. We did this back in 2016. We started this idea came up. We hosted two prop parties, really to educate our folks really about what was on the ballot and how it specifically impacted the Black community. And here we are again doing this tonight, but we're also doing it again on Saturday, October 17th. And this time it's going to be for our allies on me. So tonight we're Black women and maybe a few brothers on the Zoom as well. But on Saturday, you can be Black. You ain't got to be Black. You just need to be an ally who is interested and willing to support social movement for Black folks, and be willing to participate in Prop Party, where we learn more about what's on the ballot and how it specifically affects Black folks. So there's an RSVP link there. You see that there, and I think it'll show up in the chat if you want to share that and pass it along. And if you need a little bit more after tonight, you're welcome to join us on Saturday. So we hope to see you then. So next slide. We are. Oh, nope, not next slide. Yeah, we're going to do a poll. Sorry, thank you. So we want to hear a little bit from you all. This year is a little bit different. Okay, you all got the poll feature down. That's right. How do you plan to vote? This time it's a little bit different. So we want to just make sure that people are already planning how they plan to vote. We know that this is a different election year and people are voting differently. So please do join the poll. You got only a few more seconds to do that. And we just want to know how you plan. And if you're undecided, well, please, for the sake of the poll tonight, decide, pick one, and then have a game plan, hopefully, after tonight to figure out how you're actually going to cast your vote. All right. So, okay, it's looking like that drop off box is what most of us plan to do. So thank you so much for sharing. We do encourage you to organize your family and your friends to make sure that they are also getting their ballot turned in. Oh, there we go. There's the RSVP link in the chat. But thank you so much for taking our poll and spreading the word about voting and getting your ballot in. So we are so grateful for just the Giving Circle community, for Liberty Hill Foundation, and for a recent gift that we received, a $10,000 solidarity gift from the Latino Community Foundation, yay, who really wanted to invest in Black-led organizations, and certainly we want to do something good with those dollars. And so we have a goal to match that gift and to use those funds toward voter engagement efforts and for self-care of Black leaders in our community. So our organization and our leaders are on the front lines working and are working tirelessly, certainly in this election season, but also in response to just the COVID-19, as well as national and civil unrest is happening across the country, and the uprisings. Let me say that differently. And so we want to make sure that we're supporting our Black leaders. So we invite you to join us in a match gift, matching what the Latino Community Foundation is doing for Black leaders. So there will be an opportunity for you to donate later, and I think the link has just been put in the chat. So thank you so much for that. And we're going to move on because we want to actually go ahead and get to the heart of why we are here. We are so pleased and honored, privileged to really have this young, gifted, and just outright smart, one of the most intelligent women I have ever met, hosting and facilitating this conversation tonight. Nourbese Flint is the policy director of the Black Women for Wellness organization, and she's also the executive director of Black Women for Wellness Action Project. She leads the women's reproductive justice work, their 501c3 work in the county, and she's doing so much for women, and certainly is a fierce leader for Black girls and Black women. Look, y'all, she's doing stuff that I ain't never even heard about. Black women working assisted reproductive technologies, biotechnologies, and the intersection with reproductive justice and cultural ethics. Go ahead on, girl. We got an amazing sister in the house. And then on top of that, she's well versed, what you say, in X-Men and Batman related, Matte Lipstick, Bob's Burgers, and Star Trek. You better cover all the bases, Nourbese. We we are so honored to have you, and we are going to turn over the floor to you and just let you do what you do. So thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Felicia. What a lovely introduction. I'm so happy to be with y'all today, talking about things that I love to talk about, which is policies, which is what propositions are. Before we get started, a couple of house rules or housekeeping. First thing is we're going to do chat or questions at the end. So if you can throw them in the chat, that would be great. But make sure you put what proposition you're talking about. So we know like later on when it's like, well, what about housing? We're like, are you talking about 21? Are you talking about 15? So we know what that is, right? And so I think that's all my housekeeping. I am going to try to move through most of this pretty fast. And then for us to have a conversation, because I love the questions and the meaty stuff, and I definitely don't want to be speaking with y'all and talking at y'all for a long time. So we can go to the next slide. So like Felicia said, Black Women for Wellness, we are the first 501c4 Black women's reproductive justice organization in the country, Black Women for Wellness Action Project. Black Women for Wellness is our sister organization. It's our 501c3 that's been around since 1997. And so what does that mean? The Action Project is where we do our political and policy work, which is really fun, the things that I love to do. We have 2 offices, one in Los Angeles and one in Stockton. And yeah, we do everything all Black women. Black women and girls is our meat and potatoes. I'm a vegetarian, so I guess it's technically my potatoes and potatoes, but all the things. We can go to the next slide. And then a little bit about who I am. So I am a comic book nerd, typography snob. But the reason why I put those things, or why it's important, I think, to have a conversation of who I am and where I come from, is because when we're talking specifically about propositions or any pieces of legislation or any advice, everybody has a framework and a position and where they come from. And to understand where that is or where people are coming from is really essential to the work, right? So I'm telling you a little bit about who I am and where I center and where the work that we are looking at, right? So in the conversation around propositions, we're looking at Black women and girls and what does it do to benefit Black women and girls. That's the center of our work. That's the center of where I'm coming from in this space. And that's my perspective, right? And that's really important because you're gonna see a couple of things that are being some conflict. You might've saw some commercials that we're like not in line with, right? I love to have those questions, but also know that like when you're seeing those or when you're out in the community or asking other proposition conversations and people are like a yes on this, no on that, ask them where their root is and where they come from, because that framework is super important. Is everybody cool or understand how we're with that? Yeah, thumbs up. All right. So a little bit about what propositions are. Propositions are citizen initiatives, or essentially what is legislation that people get to vote on. They're not all states have these. I think there's 26 states have some type of citizen initiative or proposition. In California, we've passed over are put in front of us 1,200 of them, so quite a bit. And there are a double-edged sword. And this is an important part because this is going to come up later in a couple of propositions. So why is it a double-edged sword? One is that it's great sometimes when legislation is not really, or our legislators are not really doing what we need them to do, we can take it to the people and get something on and we can get it into law, which is like the good part of it. The bad part of it is that you can take it to the people and get it into law. So like, why is that a bad thing as well? Because money speaks and money talks, and that sometimes whoever has the largest amount of dollars are the ones that win, not actually the ones that are actually the greatest for the community. And particularly what's important about propositions, the vast majority of them go directly into our state constitution. So what does that mean? It takes another proposition to get them out. You can't change them through legislation, right? This is super important because if it's not put in precisely the way we would like it to be in, there's not like a fix that we can do later on in the legislative session. It goes into it like that until we pick another proposition to remove or fix it. So we'll talk a little bit more on why this comes up in a couple of these propositions, but let's start with 14. So I'm going to read a little bit from my notes because I don't have it all quite memorized. Please forgive me. It's been hot. All right. So in 2004, voters authorized Proposition 71, which is a $3 billion bond to fund stem cell research, which stated which started the California Institute of Regenerative Medicine. This money was to fund innovative approaches to issues like Alzheimer's and other diseases, as well as explore the potential application of stem cell research. But that money has been exhausted. If passed, this initiative would authorize an additional $5.5 billion in bonds for stem cell research, with a few additional changes to how funds are granted and would be awarded. With interest, the total cost of the bonds is expected to be closer to $7.8 billion. So what's the T? Black Women for Wellness Action Project supports ethical stem cell research, and we think that we should be doing innovative work in science. However, we do have a hesitation about using public dollars to fund some private research, particularly with not a lot of oversight, or actually any oversight from us as the state. So federal government has stepped up to fund these type of initiatives in the past, which are super, super important. However, right now the federal administration, or particularly the White House administration, is very anti-science and has cut a lot of funding. So for us, because we on one hand really think that it's important to think about science and innovation, right? But on the other hand, we are a little concerned about the lack of oversight, particularly because with bond measures, it is a shared pain. So we all pay the taxpayer, like as taxpayers, we all pay into paying it back, but we don't know if it's a shared benefit, particularly for Black women. We're neutral on this bill. So pretty kind of simple, but shorthand that this is essentially extending or adding extra money to a bond that we passed in 2004. So we can skip to Prop 15. So Prop 15 is something you might have seen some commercials about. It seems like it's controversial, but it's not. It is, Proposition 15 is probably one of the most important propositions on the ballot, particularly during a time of looming state recession. And just as a side note, so what I mean by looming state recession, when we started this year, we had a $5 billion surplus in our budget. So we were thinking about doing everything. It was like, oh, you get some money, you get some money. It was very Oprah, right? But COVID hit, and we had turned that $5 billion surplus turned into a $54 billion deficit. So a lot of programs got cut. And there are a whole bunch of programs that are on the chopping block, particularly if we don't get any federal funding, which doesn't look like it's coming. So we are definitely look like we're about to go into recession. So that's an asterisk. We're going to get back to Prop 15. So Prop 15's goal is to close a loophole created by Proposition 13 passed back in 1978. Proposition 13 froze property taxes based on purchase price for residential, commercial, and industrial properties. This means if you bought a house in 1985, that you would freeze property taxes on it for 1985, which is really important to some seniors and some folks who are afraid that the property taxes will get too high and they won't be able to pay for it. So sounds good, right? Well, the important part of this, and this is when I talk about this is a revisiting of propositions. What happened is they created a loophole for commercial and industrial properties to finagle their way to keeping their property tax artificially low. This means companies like Google, Apple, Exxon, and other places are paying property tax way under what the property is worth. And this proposition would essentially have them be able to get reassessed to the proper amount of money that they should be paying in property taxes. So just a note, we're thinking about this would raise over 11.4 billion with a B dollars in a year, every year for us in California. And that most of the money, 92% of the money will come from about top 10% of companies in the state. So it is not something that we're thinking that it's going to be super hurtful. It's not going to be hurtful at all, but it is something that can raise a lot of money, and it's really coming from a small group of people who are making a cash cow on a loophole in our property tax, that came from from Proposition 13. So I've gotten a couple of questions here about small businesses, and I wanted to say a couple of things about that. One, that from research that we showed that small businesses will not be affected by this, and most small businesses are assessed by what's going, like the rental, the geography, the location, and all those other things, not by property taxes. And then the second part of it, for the small ones that might take on a little bit more, there might be a potential small businesses, for some small businesses to have 1-2% rate increase in their rents, according to the studies. So with that, I also say that we should be thinking about the bigger picture and the collective struggles. Yes, there might be a couple businesses that might pay an extra $50 in order for California to send our, in order for this to pass, but this also means that we get to send our kids to better equipped schools with better paid teachers, firefighters have more money and more funding for other local important projects. So I think that is well worth the cost. And again, for the small businesses, or for companies that have our own small businesses, that they don't get reassessed until 2025 for there's a lead time. And again, this does not touch residential. So if you're thinking about what is going to happen with your home with this, it does not touch that. This is only for commercial and industrial properties. All right, so let's move to 16. So Proposition 16, oh, I'm sorry, Proposition 15 was a yes. I didn't say that out loud, but yes, it was on the screen. All right, so Proposition 16. So Proposition 16 is essentially, again, another remix of another proposition. California passed Proposition 209 back in the day in 1996 that prohibit the use of race, sex, color, ethnicity, and national origin in public employment and public education and public contracting for underrepresented communities such as women and people of color in public employment. So what does that mean? It sounds good, but actually what it did was it took away a tool for the state to look at how to remedy inequities in hiring and also in for people to be able to come into school, right? I think all of us remember that time when we heard about UCLA, they only had like 200 Black students and it was like all of them were athletes, right? This is because we don't have any tools to be like, pause, what's going on there? We need to rectify this, because 209 took that away. Now, a lot of folks are looking at this space of like, well, this is like some type of handout or there's not merit-based. No, what it does is this let us look at the institutional and systemic racism and sexism that has happened and try to recorrect for that in our system. And in order for us to do that, the state has to be able to look at it and be able to move on it. And affirmative action was one of the things that we were able to use as a tool. So this would be a yes, because it would be able to give a tool back to our state to look and address the affirmative action and essentially look at discrimination and how it's been proliferating in our public institutions. So let's move to Prop 17. So Prop 17 is another easy yes for us. Currently California does not let former felons or people who had felonies vote until they are off of parole. This will make it possible for them to do so. This is another place where California is super behind. There is no federal constitutional law that forces us to take away the voting rights of felons. There are 2 states in the District of Columbia that have no laws at all. So if you are incarcerated and you're a felony, you still can vote at all around it. And there are more states that don't require you, like once you get out, you're fine, doesn't matter if you're on parole, you're able to vote. Unfortunately here, you have to wait till you get off of parole. This will make it that you can be able to vote once you get out. This is super important because it's about 50,000 people who have served their time, paid their taxes, did what they had to do, and should be able to have a voice and an opinion on the people who are representing them. So again, this is a easy yes for us to make sure that we are righting a wrong where California is behind. So let's move to Prop 18. Prop 18 is super simple again. So this proposition will permit voters who are 17 years of age, but will be 18 years of age by the general election to be able to vote in the primary or special election. This is super important that young people have the opportunity to voice their vote on who gets to be in the runoff of elections that impacts their lives. This could give about 300,000 people the right to vote in a primary election. So what does that mean? What does that look like? So I was born in May. Let's say I was 17. I know I still look it. We know that our primary was in March, right? So I technically could not have voted if I was 17 in the primary, even though I could vote in the general election because I would have been 18 by the general election, right? This makes it for if I was 17 and the primary is in March, and even though my birthday is in May, I could still vote to choose who's going to be in those runoff elections in that November election, right? And the other important piece of this and why we want to make sure that we have young people able to choose and have an opinion in who they get to choose for, who they get to vote for in the general election, is that we know that voting is a habit. And so the earlier people, so simple, easy peasy. All right, Proposition 19. So this is an interesting one. Proposition 19 would amend the Constitution to allow home buyers who are the age of 55 or older or severely disabled to transfer their tax assessment with a possible adjustment for their prior home to their new home, regardless of their home market value. Parents would be able to transfer primary residential properties to their children and grandchildren without triggering a reassessment, so long as it's used as a principal resident, including a rental home. So this is a whole lot. And it's like, why is this on the proposition? Or why is this on our ballot? For real, to keep it 100, this is the realtors trying to get some more money and confuse people about Prop 15. Proposition 19 actually doesn't do anything really new. They're hoping that really that this would inspire people to quote unquote vote, because 2/3 of the people, oh, excuse me, three-quarters of the homeowners over 55 haven't moved since 2000. And they're thinking that this was going to get them to move out of their homes into somewhere else, places where they can start selling their houses, right? If we already have laws to protect people. So if you are a mom or a parent that wants to pass down your property to your child without having taking a hit, we already have that on the books. If you are a grandparent and a child has passed away, you want to do it to your grandchildren, there's already laws on the books for that. What this is a sneaky attempt to get into Prop 15 a little bit, right? Repeal some parts of Prop 13. But yeah, and then really just to like inspire people to move. And we know that the way gentrification is looking in our communities, that we have the most to lose from it, right? Because we know who they're going to be predatory and saying, hey, 65-year-old person, you don't need to live in this house anymore. You can take those taxes with you, right? And send you out to Fontana or Antioch or some other place out in the space and then sell your house for a whole bunch of money, right? So we are a good, clear no on this. The other part of it, they threw in something about wildfires and giving money to local municipalities. There's nothing built into this proposition that has any accountability, so we have no idea where that money goes. And so it's really a way to like trick people again into thinking like, oh, wildfires, we want to help wildfire folks. Of course we would vote for this. This is essentially a remix of something that we saw in 2018, right? They just stuck wildfires to it, and we voted that down in 2018, and now they're just trying it again. So next one, let's see, and look how I am on time. Okay, we're doing pretty good. All right, so Prop 20. If there was a hell nah proposition, like nope, full pause, stop, it is Proposition 20. Proposition 20 would allow prosecutors to charge repeat or organized petty theft as felonies, require probation officers to seek tougher penalties for those who violate their terms of their parole multiple times, expand DNA testing for people convicted of theft or domestic violence, and revoke parts of Proposition 47 passed in 2014 and Prop 57 passed in 2016. This is just the police trying to take a a big chunk of the stuff and reforms that we have done on criminal justice and take all of that back. This is a pretty terrible proposition. It got put on by law enforcement and Jim Cooper. Remember that name because he's a Black man that represents us up in the Elk Grove area. He even put this on. And essentially, it would just, one, tear up 47, tear up 57 that has been instrumental in releasing people who should not be in jail, right? And it also get more people caught up, right? So in terms of like crimes of poverty, so petty theft, things like toilet paper and stuff like that, right? Now they can be charged as felonies. And so this is super, super problematic. It's super no. We know that Black folks are already disproportionately impacted by the incarceration system, the criminal justice system in our state and our county. We also already know that Black women are already disproportionately impacted by these, and there are growing rates. California just recently been able to drop the amount of inmates per residence to, I think it's about 370 per 100,000 from 431 per 100,000. When we were at 431 per 100,000, we had the highest rate in the world, not the country, the world, the highest rate of incarceration. So this has helped us roll back some of those things. So Prop 20 is a super, super hell nah, no. You can go to 21. So Prop 21, this is another remix of another proposition. I think it was Proposition 10 in 2018. And so this would allow local governments to enact rent control on housing that would be first occupied over 15 years ago, with the exception for landlords who own no more than 2 homes with district titles of subdivided interest. So essentially, if you own a house and rent out the back, or you have a duplex and rent out one of the pieces, they're not looking at you. These are for folks who are property managers or who are looking at that, right? And what this would do would allow for us to place rent control. So what is the T on this? Back in 1995, California passed the Costa-Hawkins Act, which essentially ripped away the city's ability to address housing affordability. So what it did is saying that we cannot put in rent control into houses that are built after 1995, and also in cities that don't have rent control. So if you live in places like Glendale, Inglewood, Compton, and other places, they don't have rent control. They can raise your rent whenever they feel like it. And we've seen that where there'll be a couple, $200, $300, and then 6 months later, $200 or $300 later. This says, hey, no, we're actually going to be able to let the cities be able to do so. So I think what's really, really important about this, and to remember this doesn't put rent control in, right? This makes the cities be able to have the ability to do rent control, right? So you're still going to have an extra fight after this, but right now, cities that are even thinking about this don't have the tools to be able to think about rent control, and so this is what it does. A lot of folks are here like, well, does it make it that our city now can roll back rent control? No, it just makes it for cities to be able to choose to do rent control, and also look at places that were properties that have came past 1995 and regulate those in rent control. So Prop 22, oh Lord, talk about folks who got a whole bunch of money. Prop 22 is an interesting remix. So it's a carve out for rideshare companies like Uber, Lyft, and DoorDash to be classified as independent contractors. So what's the T? Why do we have this proposition? So in the legislature, we passed AB 5. AB 5 was really looking at gig economy and a couple of other industries who have people who are working like employees, but their employer has put them as independent contractors where they don't have to take any protections or any things to any of the benefits that you have as an employee. So what are some of the benefits that you have an employee? Sick days, workers' comp, being able to apply for unemployment, all those things that you don't get when you're an independent contractor. So there's some problems with AB5 because it caught up a little bit too many people, right? So like it caught up hairdressers who we know are really independent contractors in most cases. It caught up some folks in the film industry as well. This proposition don't touch none of that. It is just for gig companies to do a carve out for them. So why are we thinking about them being reclassified? So what's the difference between an employee and an independent contractor? Employees have certain rules, right? One of them is that they tell you when to come in and when you come to work, right? They set certain times. They give you direct options, so they tell you exactly what you're supposed to be doing and how to do it, right? So go here and you're gonna do this at this time, right? You get rated, right? And you can also get fired, right? And so if you're an independent contractor or an independent consultant, right, you're able to choose your own hours. You're able to, they don't quote unquote, your employer or the person that you're working with doesn't quote unquote fire you. It's kind of a market thing. They can stop working with you, but there's no firing. It's just market rates that decide whether you not get your job or not, right? And then you have flexibility on when you work, right? So they give you a project. If you decide to do it between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., that's your business, not ours, right? And that's what you do. If you look at those rules of what an independent contractor is and what an employer is, people who are working in the gig economy are closer to employees, right? So they tell you exactly when to go. When you turn on your app, they're telling you where you go. You usually don't know where you're gonna go until you pick up the person. You absolutely get rated, right? And so with the 5 stars, and if you jumped, you fall below a certain amount of stars, you get kicked out the program or you kicked off the app and not being able to use that. You are absolutely, you can't skip drivers, right? So if you start skipping people too many times, they still will bump you off, right? And so they're treated kind of like employees, not even kind of, very much like employees. And so we're saying to app companies that if you treat people like employees, you're gonna have to give them the employee benefits. And it's not okay to have a 2-tier system where the people who are in the companies or people who live in corporate are being able to have health insurance and all these great things and times off and all the benefits of being an employee, and the people who are making you money they don't get to have that. It also keeps them from taking responsibility, right? And so there's certain things that you take responsibility to if you're an employer. If I was a Black Woman for Wellness and somebody gets hurt on the job, there's some responsibility that I have as an employer, right? They don't have any responsibility there. So if people are getting hurt, if there's sexual violence happening, or if other things that are happening, they're not taking responsibility for it because there are independent consultants or independent contractors. They're not employees, right? So there's lots of problems in this. It is just a proposition that is put on because they don't want to pay for the rights, and they don't want to pay that extra money. And the funny thing is, we did the math on this, and they spent $185 million on the no campaign right now, on the yes campaign for Proposition 22. If they literally just paid everybody who does gig like $500,000, it would be cheaper than the campaign that they are running right now. That's how much money they're putting on this. And so this is a no for us, and not to let gig companies exploit the system and exploit workers. So Proposition 23. This is another one that I can't turn on the television without seeing some sad person like, "You want to take my dialysis centers away," like thing, right? So Proposition 23 is another remix of another proposition that again tried to happen in 2018 to regulate dialysis centers. California has 600 dialysis centers. We would need to have, and this what if this proposition would pass, would have one physician on site at all times, report patient infection data to California health officials, and end discrimination against patient based on whether their insurance coverage is public or private. And this was also put on the ballot by SEIU UHW. So the folks who are the nurses and the people who work inside the dialysis centers, the union that represents them, put this on the ballot. What's important to remember at this, DaVita and the other company that starts with the F, and I always mess up their name, so I'm not gonna try to like pronounce it now. They got a lock on many of the dialysis centers, and they're making hand over fist money. And what happens in there is that some dialysis centers are good, but many are not. And what unfortunately is happening is that, one, people who are going to these dialysis centers are not having good quality care. One of the second highest rates of death in dialysis centers is infection. What happens if you have one nurse who is running around for 20 or 30 people trying to clean up everything out of, clean up the equipment to put the next person in? This is something, if you're not familiar with dialysis, it is cleaning your blood. You are sitting there and have something running through, taking all your blood and putting it back in. Well, not all of it, but you know, most of it. And at the end, and it's something that you have to do 3 to 4 times a week. So cleanliness is super important, and making sure that they're having the time to be able to clean, to monitor, and all those things, mad important. Right now, there are no rules and regulation. It's like the wild, wild west with dialysis centers. So we've heard stories from people who like have bugs and flies and roaches falling around them while they're doing their dialysis center, all types of things. And there is nothing really to regulate them. So this is just asking, can we have a doctor there to make sure that if something goes wrong, that we can help folks? And in particular, it also says that you can't discriminate, right? So folks who are in certain insurances, they'll just be like, no, we don't want to work with you. We don't want you to be able to come in because essentially we can't make enough money off of you, right? And so it puts a stop to that. So this is super important. I wish DaVita would spend all the money that they're putting on this proposition to tell us to vote no on this, to actually do the dialysis clinics. And if they did that, we wouldn't actually need a proposition. All right, so Proposition 24. This is another interesting one. So this would expand the Consumer Privacy Act of 2018. So this is actually legislation that California passed. California has some of the best data management on the web, internet type policy there is. So if you've ever been on the website recently and you said something on the bottom that says, do you accept these cookies, right? And then it says like, you know, you can do strictly performance cookies, you know, sales cookies, things like that. That's the Consumer Privacy Act of 2018. Really, really important. This actually, oh, this is supposed to be no. Sorry, y'all. This is a no on Proposition 24. So this proposition is super interesting in the sense that it expands, right, the Consumer Privacy Act, but in a really messed up way to do kind of play to play, right? So if you now try to, what this would do essentially, you will have to pay for access for the new privacy data pieces instead of it being just for everybody like we have right now. It also, in the Consumer Privacy Act that we have in 2018, we could take that with you. So like I'm in California, but if I go to visit DC or move somewhere else, that we could take those privacies with me. So whatever I said, like no here, that goes with me where I go. This will stop that as well. So it is a good attempt to kind of look at, or it's not a good attempt. It is an attempt trying to expand some really important privacy that we need, but this is the wrong way to do it. So this is, I'm sorry, a super no on this, and so I'll change that on our proposition slide, but this is a no on Proposition 24. All right, we're gonna go to the next one. Oh, thank you, Ray. Look at that, he's so precious. Wait, did I do Proposition 25? Did we go back? We should have one more proposition. All right, so no, Proposition 24 is a no. Proposition 25 is a yes. So there we go. Sorry. So Proposition 25. I wasn't paying attention. The slides are moving too fast for me. This is really important, and this is actually, I want to spend the most time talking about Proposition 25 because this is probably something that you probably heard about, particularly if you live in Los Angeles. So unlike other propositions, Proposition 25 is a referendum. So what is a referendum? A referendum is pulling a piece of policy that we pass in the state down to a citizen conversation, right? So usually it's the opposite. And how you vote for it. So Proposition 25 is linked to a bill called SB 10 to remove cash bail. SB 10 was a bill that we all were excited about when it first got introduced. It got introduced, and then halfway through the series, it got some amendments that we didn't feel good about, no one really felt good about, but got signed and put into law, right? So now we have SB 10 on the books. What do we do about it? The bail bonds industry was like, hell no, and decided to pull this bill down and to take away what it did was remove cash bail. The cash bail system in SB 10 it did remove cash bail all the way, right? But instead it put in risk assessments and has a judge or a district judge be able to make decisions about whether somebody can go or stay into pretrial detention. Where it gets funky is that the risk assessments we know are not going to be great, right? There needs to be a more human element to the risk assessments, and there's bias built into these risk assessments. But why are we a yes on SB 10 or on our Prop 25? This is about strategy. The way this proposition is written is that it would make it really, really very difficult for us to pass legislation to remove cash bail after this. So if this SB 10 goes down, we're not gonna be able to do this through California state legislation for a good long time unless we have another proposition. It is really important to get that, because if we take this, we have an opportunity right now to end the cash bail system and end the bail bonds people. There are two folks that have a lot of money in Sacramento who are in the criminal justice space who are opposed from us. One is the police unions and law enforcement. The other one is the bail bonds industry. There's the district attorneys, there's the judges that do have lobbyist groups up in Sacramento, but they don't got money like law enforcement and the bail bonds industry. Bail bonds industry made $560 million in profit last year in California, right? So if we are able to get rid of the bail bonds industry right now, that gives us a lot of leverage to be able to, one, go back and fix SB 10 because there are problems in it, right? And two, pass some of the other criminal justice reform that needs to get passed that went down this year as well. If we don't get Prop 25 over the finish line, in my opinion, the SEIU's opinion, and the lawyers that we talked to, that's pretty much it for us getting statewide cash bail reform in this state, right? Unless, again, we do it through a proposition. And so we believe that it's important to keep SB 10 alive and then be able to go back through legislation and get it to the place that we need it. Just as an off chance, so, they said I was policy director back when we did the intro. I do our policy for Black Women for Wellness. And I had a conversation with the legislator who made me a solemn public promise that as soon as if we get Prop 25 that lives, right, that he will bring legislation to address the risk assessment literally this like January of next year when our next session starts, right? So this is not something we got to wait a long time to get fixed. This is something that we have legislators on board to, but he says like, in order for me to do that, I have to have SB 10 live, right? And we have to be able to legally be able to do that. So that's why we are a yes on SB 10, like yes on Proposition 25. Nobody likes SB 10. Let me just frank, if you're on the justice side, nobody is like, ooh, yes, SB 10 is perfect the way it is. This is a conversation about strategy and playing the long game and how we are going to play the long game in terms of removing the bail industry and removing and doing some really like transformational, there we go, transformational stuff when it comes to criminal justice. And that's what we're able to do if we're able to let SB 10 leave and get rid of the bail bonds. This is their Hail Mary. This is their like one last piece to try to make sure that they still are in a business in the state. And without this, if this lives, we can get rid of them and start making the fixes in the criminal justice and the jailing system and all those things without having to worry about all their money floating around Sacramento, but also locally in the local states and districts and cities that they also flow money into. So with that, I think we are ready for some questions. I think I finished right on time.
Yeah, awesome. There are several questions that have come up in the chat. I don't know if you, we can certainly pitch them to you if that's best. There were a couple on Prop 15. I guess we'll take it one at a time. Not sure if this, if Casey, if you felt like the question was answered, but we'll offer it again. On Prop 15, have businesses threatened to leave the state if their taxes increase?
I mean, yeah, they always say they threaten to leave the state. They're not going to. So like, do I think that Apple's going to get up and be like, we're going to Colorado now? No. It is always a threat that happens with big companies that say that they're going to leave because this and that. But honestly, the reason why people stay in California is not because they get a break on their property tax. It is the other laws that we have, the access to the people, that it's a place that people want to live and all those things. So.
And then there's a question about how it affects the rural farmers, how Proposition 15 affects rural farmers.
I actually don't know how it impacts farmers per se. So I will actually do some digging. I'm not sure who wrote that to me, but if you drop your email, I will do some digging and then I'll get back to you on what it does with rural farmers. I'll make that down. It's a note. Felicia, I think you're on mute.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then there was a question about rental properties.
Yeah.
For Prop 15, and do you want to say more about the impact on folks with rental property?
If you for Prop 15.
Yeah. For Prop
15. If you are in, it doesn't touch residential. So if you are talking about like, are your rents are going to go up because you live in an apartment or you're renting out your house? No, it doesn't. This has nothing to do with residential folks. If you're talking about if you like are a shop owner and have a small business and you're renting, no, this is just for owners, right? And so again, this is the conversation about that not until 2025 for owners that own small businesses that they're even going to do the reassessment, right? But if you are somebody who pays rent, that is not on you. It is the owners who own the property that we should be looking at, or who are going to get the reassessment and paying taxes.
Yeah. And again, yeah, that's commercial rental property. Yeah. Okay. And then there was a question about Prop 22, which the person talked about a lot of gig workers wanting to retain that flexibility. And would a yes mean they lose that flexibility?
No, they still get the flexibility. It doesn't change the way in which they can work. It just changes the benefits on what they have, right? Mm-hmm. And so they can run the same, they are running like employees already, right? It just, now they actually get the same benefits. So I think COVID is a particular interesting example of what that means, right? So so in other years, right, if the Congress did not change the law, if you are an independent contractor or independent consultant, right, or self-employed, you were not able to get unemployment, right? And so those folks who have been working for hours and hours, because a lot of gig people, they don't do this as a side hustle, this is their hustle, right? They weren't able to get any type of unemployment for this. And because they are classified, again, as independent contractors, this would be able for them to do so. So you still get the flexibility, you still get to be able to choose when and when off. You just get some benefits. And there's also some safety nets or something, responsibilities that that the employer has to take a part of as well.
Okay. Let me ask, I think there might have been, let me see if there was a clarifying point about the Prop 15 rental. So let me clarify that if I can. The question is about if you own rental property, what are the implications for small landlords and residential landlords? Let me just make sure, and I'm sorry, I may have to ask you to come off to make sure that and actually address the question so that we're clear about what you're asking as it relates to Prop 15's impact on residential landlords and small, it sounds like you said small landlords. So are you okay to come off and offer up your question? Come off mute. Can we take them off? Are they all on mute, Gloria?
It's just, if you can just raise your hand, that would be helpful.
Okay. In the meantime, maybe we'll come off later and then sorry, I wanted to make sure we got to it, but I realized that we'll move on until you're able to come off mute. Yeah, Anne-Marie, I was looking to see if Anne-Marie, are you there? All right. In the meantime, we'll move on. Okay, so there was a lot of questions about the confusion about Proposition 25. For those who heard the detailed explanation, do you still have questions about Proposition 25? And if so, you're welcome to come off mute and offer that question up. Okay. All right. I think Anne-Marie, you back?
Oh, I could talk a little bit about Prop 25. Sure. Okay. So the risk assessment is not like useful, right? Let me be very clear about it, right? The risk assessment needs to be changed, but this is not a conversation. When I'm thinking about Prop 25, remember how I said like propositions are very final, but legislation can be changed, right? This is a place that we think that we can change this in legislation for the risk assessments. They do not go immediately into effect. We have 1 year to change the risk assessment. There's a place in Sacramento that did a little bit of a version of this, right? That has used the risk assessments, but modified them for them to actually work for people. So there are pieces in the risk assessment, like you need to have a safe place to go home. Well, that's hard if you don't have a place to live and things like that, right? So they have added a human component to actually get people and let them up with the resources that they need, housing, a place to stay, all the things, for then we can let people out for pretrial detention so they are able to get out. I think that there are very viable things to fix risk assessment. We are not going to be able to do that if Proposition 25 goes down, if SB 10 goes down. This is not a conversation that we think that risk assessments are great or that we should stay with what we have right now. This is a long-term, like, how do we get the bail bonds industry out of California? So take them out and then actually think about how are we going to do our criminal justice system and pretrial detention before then without having them as an influence. I say this is really important because, like, I do a lot of policy. And it's really important to understand the dynamics of who have money and who doesn't, right? But also thinking about short-term and long-term. I'm not going to sit here and say that there's not going to be nobody hurt while we try to figure this out, who didn't get out, who shouldn't be, or somebody who got stuck inside, right? While we're trying to figure this out. Absolutely. But there's absolutely people that we know who get really hurt by the bills industry right now, right? Having to put up your house, trying to figure out all those things. And we know if you're using a bail bonds person, you're losing that money straight up. You don't get that money back for that 5-10% that you put down, or that you're giving to them in order to bail your folks out. So people are getting hurt on both sides. This is how we play the game for the long-term win. So do we like say, oh, this bill wasn't perfect, let's not only do we pull it back, but let's not ever be able to do cash bail again in the state? Or we have to go through a proposition that costs a ton of money, is millions of dollars to run a proposition? Or are we saying, all right, let's figure out SB 10 and get that? Because we could still get rid of SB 10. It's a piece of legislation. It can get changed every year. It can be modified every year because it's a piece of legislation. And you can do that in the state. You can't do that with propositions, and you can't do that with a referendum.
All right, any other questions about that, or just feel free to let us know. There was something about Proposition 22, another follow. Are you saying that Uber, Lyft are not permitted to require their folks to work certain hours? Or are you saying that it is not likely that they will require their folks to work certain hours? Commercials seem to be saying that if Prop 22 doesn't pass, then Uber, Lyft will require set hours for their people.
No, what we're seeing is that Prop 22, excuse me, let me tell the simplest way to say this. Okay, so what we're seeing is they are already treated like employees. We just want them to get the benefits. So you get to set your own, quote unquote, you get to set your own hours, but there are some minimum amount of hours that you got to stay on in order for you to keep your activeness on the app. So if you're a driver on DoorDash or Uber or Lyft, right? What we're saying is that because we know that like once you turn your app on, that you can't skip people the way you want to skip people, so that you can't really, you don't usually know where you're going until after you pick up the person, right? All those things, that those things keep you closer to an employee than you are an independent contractor. We also are hearing from drivers who want to organize and have a union and things like that, saying like, yo, we want to be treated. We are a full economy that is running, and we are not getting the benefit of being able to organize to get the benefits that they can get. Uber and Lyft and DoorDash and all of them have all the money to be able to do this. We just want them to be able to treat folks with dignity. And that's why we're on a no on Prop 22. We had asked them to come to the table and have conversations with them beforehand, and they refused to. That's why AB 5 ended up getting passed, right? Because we've been having, or the state has been trying to say, hey, you can't keep treating employees like this because we're getting all these type of like complaints and things that are happening, and we're trying to figure out what's going on with like the sexual violence that's happening, and we're like, yo, you need to take some responsibility, and they're just like, we don't have to take none. So this is our attempt. AB 5 was an attempt to do that, and Prop 22 is just like, okay, you can regulate everybody else, but you can't regulate us.
Nourbese, there's a question. Why were there not more ads on Prop 23?
Like the no on Prop 23?
Yeah, it's about the, I think, dialysis.
Yeah, because folks don't have that money. We don't got that type of money. So this is the unions trying to put this together. We wish we had that type of money that we can burn, but like that actually shows you how much money DaVita is making in profit, right? Because they can run a commercial every 5 seconds. Then they got old girl Alice up there talking from the NAACP on everything. And let me just take an asterisk right now because we family. The NAACP, do not trust them on any of these propositions. Alex got them bought up. I will put the link in whatever you need to find the information, but she is on the wrong side, which means the NAACP of California is on the wrong side of all these propositions. Let me just flag that. But yes, the reason why you're not seeing a lot of Prop 23, no on 23, is that they just don't have enough money to run those. And just to say, if you know anything about elections, it's something I found out when we were doing elections. It actually costs more money to run ads during this time because so many people are competing for that money. It actually is a bidding process. And so it's more expensive to run ads, even more expensive than it usually is to run ads in terms of commercials on television and like on Sling and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I have a question here from Casey Patterson on Prop 25. There's disagreement in the Black progressive community about voting yes or no, primarily because of the use of the risk assessment, which will impact Black folks. So wondering what a no vote really means.
Right. So like I said before, a no would just keep things the way they are. So SB 10 never went into effect. And so because it got pulled immediately for a referendum. And so the way things we have with cash bail right now is the way they will continue. So we won't be using a risk assessment, you'll still be using cash bail. But what it does do, and I cannot understate this enough, is that it does freeze what the state can do. Now, there are folks on the ground that are doing some really interesting and innovative work at the county level and using different opportunities to do that. And that work can still continue. But in terms of like a final blow to get the cash bail industry out, we would miss that opportunity. And in terms of being able to do any substantive statewide information or statewide legislation on getting rid of cash bail or even fixing cash bail, we would miss that opportunity as well.
We had a question from Anne Marie. I just unmuted you. You can go for it.
Thank you. Felicia sent me something privately in the chat, so I think she takes care of it. But what I was asking before was around residential landlords. And so you made the distinction in answering that question up front about no impact for Prop 15 on residential owners at all. I just wanted to double check that you also meant residential landlords, or if there was a number of units and if that moves from, you know, small time, mom and pop.
No, it's okay. Just for commercial businesses. So like if you are an owner of like Starbucks and McDonald's and things like that, then yes. But if you, like a strip mall, but if you are, you know, if you have properties that you manage as an owner, no, this doesn't trust that.
Thank you.
Nourbese, there's a question about getting some resources and some links together. We're going to follow up with you all with a recording of this webinar, and if Nourbese can send over some links, and then for Black Women for Wellness and everything, that way you guys can read up on it on your own. And I think you have your prop guide that is digital as well, right?
Yes, I will put in the chat our prop guide. The other thing that I failed to mention is that we have a whole election center that's going on. And so every Friday we have office hours. Our office hours, again, are some place that you can come in and ask questions. So you can ask questions about the propositions. You can ask questions about candidates. You can ask questions about how you get your ballot to where you need to get it to, and all those things. And so every Friday you can come in with a list of questions. We got a list of experts who will help you get to your answers. And so we'll have a lot of those going on. I'll drop that in the chat too for you all to be able to see that information and sign up and come chat with us.
And we have another question about Prop 18. If there are other items on the ballot, can 17-year-olds vote on those other items or only vote on presidential candidates?
They'll be able to vote on everything that's on the ballot.
Wonderful. Was that, do we have any more questions coming through?
I think that was it. Nourbese, would you be able to, I think this is local to LA only, but just touch upon Measure
Measure
J?
J. Yes, it's a yes. Just vote yes. It's another criminal justice reform. I will be putting together a full write-up in the next week or so on it, but I don't have all the details on me right now. I apologize. So if you come to us on Friday, I'll have it for you. But essentially, it is another piece of really important reform that our communities are doing. I think Patrice put it on the ballot. It's an easy yes on J. And I'm gonna circle back on RR, which I know folks got that on their ballot as well. I hadn't did all my research on the local ones yet, except for J, which is good.
All right. If there are no questions, no more questions, I think we are coming to the end of our time. Gloria, give me a thumbs up if that's where we are on our agenda. Okay. So we want to thank you all again for just taking your time to be here tonight, and also to remind you to not forget the solidarity gift and the opportunity to really match what the gift that was made to the Giving Circle, to continue to do things like this, and also to support organizations like the Black Women for Wellness project that's really doing really important work both locally and at the state. So make sure that you follow the links, share, make a donation, and also share the link to the party on Saturday, Allies on Me. It starts at 10:30 a.m., goes to 12. We would love to see you there, and would love for you to share the event on Facebook and on Twitter. We really appreciate your time, and just thank you all so much for being here tonight. And with that, I think we gonna rock out with some music. We started with some music. I don't know if we're gonna end with some music. There we go. Thank you all. Have a good night.